Good afternoon. Calling to order this meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. My name is Cam Gordon. I'm Vice Chair of the committee. The Chair of the committee, Councilmember Yang, is out of town. I'm joined today so far by Councilmembers Reich, Quincy, and Palmisano. Okay. Hope everybody could hear that. We have 5 items on our agenda today. The first 4 items are consent items. I'll go through those first, and our last item is a discussion item, which is just our recap that we've been doing, our mid-year recap of all the departments, and we'll hear from the police department. The first item on the consent agenda is accepting a grant from FEMA for a fire ground survival training program in the amount of $659,150. Will go from January 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017. Second item is passing a resolution accepting a donation from Police Executive Research Forum in the amount of $1,000 for travel expenses for Chief Janae Harto. Third item is authorizing a contract with Versiterm, Inc. for the design, implementation, and support of a commercial off-the-shelf law enforcement records management system, along with ancillary software and services in the amount of $9,800,000 for an approximate duration of 12.5 years, with the option to extend up to 5 additional years. And the fourth item is authorizing an amendment to contract with SMG for the police department to provide law enforcement services in the neighborhoods adjacent to U.S. Bank Stadium. And we'll be altering the start date of the agreement to July 22nd, 2016. Would anyone like to pull any of those items off for discussion or questions? Councilmember Palmisano?
Thank you, Chair Gordon. I just want to confirm that as we have this item number 3 referred to Ways and Means, that we'll have a fulsome discussion about where that funding is coming from mid-year. I got a little bit more information yesterday that some of this money is coming from CLIC over the past couple of years. Some of it comes from CARS. Police is putting some money into this. But I just need a much better understanding of how this is being funded now, and some of the records information unit stuff and things from our data governance audit are being put aside. So I will look to do my own research and have more thorough questions at Ways and Means, and I think that's where you would agree a discussion about how we're funding this would be had.
That would be certainly appropriate with me. I'm not on Ways and Means.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, so it's easy for me to say I'm not the chair of the committee and I don't set the agenda, but all of these items will be referred to Ways and Means, where they certainly can be discussed, and I know that you are in Ways and Means, and so is Councilmember Quincy, and I'm sure he just heard what you said, and he's smiling about it, so I think that makes sense. So then on seeing no other discussion on the consent items, then I'll move all 4 of those items for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay, those motions carry then. And then we have our 5th and final item, which is our report from the police department, a recap and of where we are mid-year 2016. And I think Deputy Chief Glampy is here to report. Well, we've got a good team. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. Deputy Chief Bruce Falkins and myself are going to co-present. And we would certainly take any direction, because 5 minutes, we could probably talk on any given topic within the police department for 5 minutes. So we'll do our best to briefly sum up some of the highlights so far, and certainly, take any questions. I'll start out with staffing. I know that's important for everybody. So as we sit today, we are at 833 sworn officers on the street. It's also very important for us to note that we have another 27 in the academy that are scheduled to graduate on November 1st. We have another 32 that are slated to begin a week from Monday in our academy and will graduate December 20th. So yet this year, if I can get the math right, we have 59 more bodies that we are anticipating hitting the street by the end of the year. That will add up to a very robust sworn force by the end of the year, provided nobody else separates. Usually we are between 20 to 24 people, roughly 2 people a month. Historically, our attrition is 2 people. We're already at 26 this year. Last year we're at 38. Unfortunately, I would love to be able to give you a predicted number for the end of the year, but people literally walk in one fell swoop, turn their badge in and say, I'm done effective immediately. So it's very difficult for us to predict who's going to leave and when. So that being said, to give you a final number at the end of the year, we're really hoping that we don't lose too many more. So come the end of the year, we're well staffed out in the street. A couple of other highlights, specifically training stuff. We were given direction to do crisis intervention team training. I'm happy to report that is going along exactly as scheduled, and we hope to have everyone on patrol, almost 500 people, trained by the end of the year. So that is an absolute success for us. And then we'll continue that next year with the rest of the department. It's a large undertaking, taking a week per officer to train. So it's a heavy investment, but it's paying off, and we're very pleased we've been able to keep on schedule with that. We are also pleased to announce every single sworn officer in the department has been through fair and impartial policing or implicit bias training. That is officially completed, and everybody has been through it. Again, a huge undertaking to make sure everybody's gone through that. Deputy Chief Falcons is going to talk about our national initiative and procedural justice. I was there this morning doing my training. Again, we are right on track with that, and by the end of the year, everybody will be through all procedural justice training. Looking ahead to next year, we talked about the RMS, or the records management system. We're going to have to train on that next year. We have more crisis intervention training. We're going to have some Super Bowl training coming up. We're a year and a half away from the Super Bowl. That is going to be sneaking up on us. So those are all things we're anticipating next year. And that doesn't even touch upon our normal state mandated firearms, defensive tactics, driving training, legal updates that we have to do. So lots of stuff on the training plate. And then finally, I'll just finish up with the body cams. We've talked much more than 5 minutes about those. Everything is going right as we want it to. First Precinct and Fourth Precinct are entirely equipped with body cams. Lots of good feedback from the officers. The First Precinct took it and absolutely ran with it, giving us great feedback. Fourth Precinct, I've not heard anything coming out of there that would cause us any concern. And we are ready to go with the Third Precinct middle of August doing their training. And by the end of October, we should have all roughly 600 body cams out on the street functioning. So again, everything's going right on track with body cams. Turn over to Deputy Chief Falcons.
Thank you, Chair Gordman.
Welcome.
Just a couple of quick things on the national initiative and our procedural justice updates. Everyone's been through, it's divided into 3 modules of 24 hours of training. Module 1, everybody in the MPD is already completed. We should be about 2 weeks out from completing everybody in Module 2, and Module 3 will be completed by the end of the year. As a side note, last week I just got a request through the state's Violent Crimes Coordinating Council, who oversees the state task forces, that they want to have a discussion on the NI training that we've done and where we're at with procedural justice, because I think Minneapolis is leading the way in the state with this topic. People are now starting to look at us and coming to us and saying, can you come and talk to us about this program that you're in? And hopefully that it'll expand out throughout the state. So it's a good sign that we're on the front end of this, and people are coming to us and asking us, how are we doing it? So I think right now it's being viewed as a big success. And moving into next year, we've already started the discussions of sustainability of the program and making it just part of the culture of the MPD moving forward. We've discussed how we're going to implement it into the recruit training from day one when they start coming through the recruit academy. And it also gives Chief Harteau, who has taken it upon herself to talk to every incoming member of coming into the department, having those discussions with them in those meetings with the incoming officers. So we're really looking at sustaining this as part of the culture of the MPD, which I think is exciting as we move forward. A quick update on our violent crime. Yes, we are up this year. Unfortunately, our violent crime up this week, we're up at 5.1% in violent crime this year. With every dark cloud, there is a silver lining to that. We are the last 3 weeks we have seen the dial start to reverse itself a little bit, and hopefully some of the things that we're doing of adding the extra enforcement in the 4th precinct and our MSTAT meetings of really trying to come together as command staff with the inspectors and trying to find solutions to these violent crime problems. Last week, like I said, this week we're up 5.1%. Last week it was 6.1%, and the week before it was 6.9%. So we've seen a definite turn. Hopefully we can sustain that turn, but at least there's some good news in the direction that this seems to be going. And finally, the total Part 1 crimes for the year, we are still down 2.3% citywide in our Part 1 crimes. So violent crimes is the target for the police department, really trying to attack that and bring that number back down into the negatives moving forward and into next year. Couple initiatives that we're
Maybe before the initiatives, Councilmember
Oh,
Quincy has a question, I think, about the,
Yes, sir.
the stats.
Sure. Thank you, Commander. My question, I think you just answered a little bit, was all Part 1 crimes are down 2.3?
yes,
Is that right?
yes,
And that includes the violent crime increase.
yes,
And I assume those numbers are the increases or the decreases over 2015 year-end totals?
yes.
Is that right?
Year-to-date total. So we
Year-to-date?
compared the same year-to-date last
Okay.
year to the year-to-date this year.
Obviously, what concerns all of us all
Yep.
the time, especially in the police department, is in
Yes, sir.
2015 overall, violent crime was up 6.7%.
Right.
And so those increases of this year over last year are compounded with those 2 years of impact.
Fully realize that,
I'm sure you would.
in operating off of historic lows, we're really trying to get that back down to even more historic lows.
Thanks. Just wanted to clear that up of what we're comparing that to, and it's year to date, not year end.
No, year-to-date from last year to this week, and year-to-date this year to this week.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just curious about where's the, okay, Council President.
Okay, nobody down there wants.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. And I just saw this morning, I think, isn't the 4th precinct up 10% though? That's what sticks in my head. Year to date?
Year-to-date, they're up 11%.
11,
Yeah,
okay.
11%.
So I have a Wednesday morning care meeting, and Inspector Jose was there this morning. And yesterday we had a shooting where the car ended up running into the Capri Theater on Broadway, car-to-car shooting. This is just really intolerable for citizens. And I think people in North Minneapolis are becoming numb to what's going on. You hear shots fired so many times, you don't even pay attention to it anymore. And it's really dangerous. It is very dangerous out there. And I don't see it getting better. I really don't. And I remain really concerned about this. I think it's intolerable for a community. We are under siege. These people that are shooting at each other are endangering all of us. All of us. Can't go to the grocery store without thinking about it. Drive down Broadway, put yourself at risk. Lots and lots of businesses along Broadway have been targeted. The school district building, Dimensions in here. So I mean, you think twice about where you go out in public. It's not good for businesses. I was with Congressman Ellison at Lowry Cafe the other day, last week. We were 20 feet away from where a 2-year-old was killed and another child injured. Bullet went through from that shooting. Bullet went through the hardware store. How's anybody supposed to run a business when this is what's going on? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's intolerable.
Council President, totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. One of the things that I was going to bring up next, if I can move forward to one, is the Ceasefire University and working with folks from the National Network for Safe Communities. It's a program where we identify these groups, bring them in with community partners, law enforcement partners, prosecution, bring a whole bunch of people in and start to talk to these folks. We're working through with Mayor Hodges' office on this also. Bringing folks in and having people impress upon that this type of activity has to stop, and it will stop, and that it won't be tolerated, not by the community, and certainly not by the police department. And then if they want services and stuff, we'll help them to try to get themselves out of that lifestyle, because quite honestly, we don't want them in that lifestyle. There's great minds and people and potential in these folks that are caught up in this, and we need to get them away from the violence and move them into being productive members of our community. So we want to help these folks, and when they don't take our help and don't go the wrong way or the right way, if they want to go the wrong way, then we will bring all our partners in the law enforcement community, not only to them, but to their group, to help affect change. So the history of this type of program across the different communities in the country has been a pretty good success. So that's why Chief Hartoa has brought this to Minneapolis, and I'm the point person to help getting the implementation here in Minneapolis. So we really are trying to get sooner than later, because the need is now.
That's good to hear about Project Ceasefire. Is that what we're
Yes,
calling
sir.
it? Yeah. And is that was that going on in Chicago for a while? And
It's going on in various parts of Chicago and
Okay.
smaller communities, and it's been carried out through many, many different departments and cities in the country, and the results are astounding. It goes back to when our homicide rates really spiked up towards that 99 and 100, and we had the HEALS project, Minnesota HEALS. This is a continuation of that, and we're also in this discussion this time also is looking at also making this part of just the way we do business moving forward, so that when we see success, we don't stop it. We keep going with it, because if you don't keep on these things, success seems to erode away, and we really want to stay on top of it and make that also culture or part of just the way we do things here in Minneapolis.
well, maybe we'll have an opportunity to get more of a presentation on ceasefire in the future sometime when it's starting to be implemented. I just wanted to note that I'm shocked when I look at some of the statistics, and one of the most disturbing ones for me has been the number of victims with gunshot wound increased dramatically citywide. I think it's up 26% from a year ago, and almost 40%, or at least between 30 and 40% from 2 years ago. But then when you look at it by precinct basis, and this is in the 4th precinct, it's up over 40%
Yep.
just from last year. So even though our the homicides, and every homicide is terrible, but it's about flat, or
We're down this year, yes.
We're down a little bit. So
Thank goodness.
which is fantastic, but there's all those potential. If they're victims of gunshot wounds, some of them were this far away from being a homicide or not. It depends. But so obviously there's a problem with people are too many guns in the city, and it's hard to get a handle on. So focusing in on those, I understand ceasefire helps focus in on problem areas and put resources where it's needed, and try to get support before it's too late for folks, and interrupt and intervene before violence occurs. I think it's promising, but I just wanted to highlight those statistics because I think it surprises people, and that's kind of a real indication that we've got to do more to help get people from
We
using
in the
guns.
police department share exactly what you're saying. Is the number of people shot is unacceptable. It is unacceptable for a community to have to put up with.
Councilmember Johnson.
Mr. Chair, so where do you get that statistic?
So I just, when every week they put out their MSTAT for the weeks.
Uh-huh.
And so we are now tracking the number of victims with gunshot wound. It's in the bottom. So you can come and look at the screen if you want. So you know how you can, there's the citywide, and then you scroll down. Here's the 4th precinct. And so they're kind of telling you how many this week compared to last week. And it's an increase. That's the percent of change for the week in question. And then they also so year to date, yeah.
Thank you.
So, yep.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is very valuable. And so I really appreciate the transparency and the information that you're providing on the website and those things too. Now, I don't know if you have any more of a presentation.
I just want to say that when the comment about transparency is, and we do agree with that, we're in this together, and the approach is trying to solve violent crime.
I just had a couple more questions, but Councilmember Quincy has a question too, I think.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you could be interrupting your own thought. I
That's
didn't
all
mean to do that, but I was looking at the 2015 year-end report, and a lot of that was 2016, looking forward, what's out there. And a couple things that have been touched on. You mentioned staffing earlier. I think one of the things we could use a little more information about, because I think it's a good story, is about the CSO class. If you could talk about that, and then I have a couple other things after that.
Absolutely, Councilmember Quincy. So our CSO class, we hire in January. We start them every January. So right now we're actually backgrounding approximately 60 candidates for CSO so they can start in January. And that's very strategically done so it lines up with their school year. At all times, we want to have approximately 30 CSOs working for us because, for instance, in this recruit class I talked about that's going to happen in a week, we're promoting 14 CSOs to the position of recruit. These are all people we vetted for the last year to 2 years. They know the city of Minneapolis. They know the Minneapolis Police Department. And quite honestly, they're real good kids. And I call them kids because most of them are.
Because they're young, right?
So no, our plans are to keep that going. Our last CSO class was 60% of the class hired was protected class, either by race or gender. So we really get some bang for our buck in our hiring with the CSOs. So that is an absolute focus of
Yeah,
ours.
I just love that entire program. It's a real good hiring strategy for the city. They're local. They represent the community that they're about to serve, and it's a terrific thing. And so I wanted to highlight that. The other thing you had mentioned earlier, which I appreciated, was the crisis intervention training, the CIT. It's on track and doing well, and as well as the implicit bias training and procedural justice that you just mentioned, DC folks. The other one is the early intervention system was on the list. I wonder if we could talk about that, as well as general community engagement process, not just what's being accomplished in number of events, but how we're doing that in cost.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for bringing up the EIS program. That's one that, again, we could talk a long time about. So the EIS program is up, and we're actually going to be promoting a person to the rank of lieutenant to start handling that effective August 7th. So they will be in place, and we also received an overwhelming number of applicants to the point where I was asked, do you want to extend it a week? We had 67 qualified applicants apply to be one of our civilian coordinators for that position. I said, no, if we've got let's get this going. So we are on track to have that. Basically, once the lieutenant's in place, they're going to be able to start immediately. And they're going to get the software program that we've been talking about, but they can manually go in and start that program immediately. So August 7th is a promotion date. That's a Sunday. August 8th, this is gonna get going. So we're got that up and going.
So as we look forward, we should see some results at the second half of this year, and that should be really interesting to compare as we're looking at funding and how we're going to shift priorities.
I would think we'll be able to provide some statistics of what we're seeing at that point and how we're moving forward. Yes.
Right. And that's tied to reducing the number of young people, especially who are exposed to domestic violence. Is that correct?
No, that's going to be a different program.
Which program was that one?
To be clear, the early intervention system, the EIS, is
just
to identify police officers that are in need of help.
I missed that. Understood that then. I do understand that one, but what was I looking at that was the domestic violence?
That's a pilot in the fourth ward or fourth precinct about follow-up with victims of domestic violence next day.
Okay, good.
If I can comment on it, we have been working with the city attorney's office and folks from the public health office, as well as the domestic abuse project, in the pilot project of doing follow-up on 911 calls where no police report was made on a domestic violence situation. Right. And going back with an officer from the precinct and a family services advocate to make contact with the 911 caller. Number one, to see if there is a problem where we need to make a police report for investigation. And number two, to start delving into with them what the family problems are, and are there services that can be provided to help them break that cycle of violence, especially when there's kids involved or witnessing that violence.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give a compliment. I met one of the CSOs who's going to start this recruit class the night of the Aquatennial Parade. He stopped my car. But anyway, it was a lovely young man, and he is very excited about starting the recruit class. And he's been a CSO, I think, he said, for 2 years. So that's great. Great program.
We're all curious about why he stopped your car and what you were doing, but we won't go into that now.
They were letting the runners go by.
Okay, it's just the traffic, okay. I see, very good, very good. So I had two little questions, and you might not have the answer for this, but what we're always wondering about is the makeup of the police department. You talked about the new officers and CSOs, so do we have any tracking in terms of the racial, gender breakup or breakdown of the officers?
We do, but that data, Vice Chair Gordon, is held by Human Resources. So
Okay.
I know that our Human Resources generalist has that data. It would be very simple to get it to you, so we can follow up with that.
Well, and when you mentioned people who were separating from the city or leaving the city, we were noticing that, and some of the research that was being done is even as we think we're hiring more diversity, then if we're not watching what diversity we're losing, it ends up we're not necessarily making much ground or not. My second question had to do with any incentives we might have for officers who choose to live in the city of Minneapolis. Somebody mentioned they thought that we had some kind of a program, and I don't believe that we do. Are you aware of anything above and beyond what we might offer the average citizen?
I'm not aware. We used to have a program where houses would be offered up at almost like an interest-free loan rate. I remember that, but I haven't heard of that program in quite a while. I am unaware of any incentives for living in the city, and I think that would almost have to be a citywide program. One of the problems being that that could potentially be a contractual issue if you are able to compensate one member of the bargaining group more than the other. But something certainly we could look into and figure out if we can do that outside of the bargaining unit. That would be a great incentive to get people to either move into the city or get them interested if they already live in coming and working for us.
And I'm sure there are a lot of questions on a lot of details, and that's why I was surprised when I heard that. I do think there might be some reasons for doing it, but it's a much bigger discussion than we can have right here, right now, today. But I think having more city employees actually live in the city is fantastic. We like people living in the city, no matter who they are. So I don't see any other questions. So I think that we just have to move and receive and file this presentation. So I will make that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. And then seeing no further business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, council members.